Welcome to Agatha Christie She Watched, our spoiler-heavy look at the movie and TV adaptations of the mystery genre's greatest writer. I'm Bill Peschel of Peschel Press, publisher of the annotated novels of Agatha Christie, and today we're talking about mysterious mediums, a wise child, post-war traumas, and water in the basement. A lot of water in the basement. It's A Haunting in Venice, the 2023 Hercule Poirot movie starring Sir Kenneth Branaugh in his third outing as the Belgian detective and Tiny Fey as Ariadne Oliver. But first, let me introduce my partner in marriage as well as crime of the fictional kind, Teresa Peschel. Teresa, thank you for coming today.
Oh, it's so fun to be back here in your little basement office again. We haven't done these podcasts in weeks, and yet here we are, and we just got back from seeing A Haunting in Venice at the flagship cinema in Palmyra, because Hershey doesn't have a theater anymore, darn it, so we had to go all the way to Palmyra, and I want you folks to know it was worth the drive to Palmyra to see A Haunting in Venice. I really didn't know what to expect. I saw the trailers, I read what little bit there was available online, and I knew that some of the names would match, and that it would look gorgeous. And it was better than that. It was so much better than Death on the Nile. Oh my God, it was so much better.
Let me
Still flawed, but
see, you're not following. I'm trying to lead, and you're not following me. We've talked about this before, haven't we?
Yes, dear. He loves it when I say that.
Yes, I hear it so rarely. What I wanted to say though first is that we're going to go spoiler free in the beginning here. Even though we're a spoiler-heavy podcast, we decided, because we just saw the movie, and actually we didn't decide to do the podcast I didn't until we came out of the theater, and I thought, what the heck, let's go ahead and do this. And we'll be spoiler-free for the first few minutes here, so if you want to stay around and find out what we think of it, we'll give you the conclusion. And then at a certain point, we'll give you all the warnings you need, and after that, the barn doors open and the horses are going to run free. So, like you said, we were expecting, if anything, like a Death on the Nile. We were expecting to be disappointed, right?
Yes, I was really expecting to be disappointed. The trailers all indicated that it had been shot in the dark, which large portions of the movie were, and I really don't like that. The trailers indicated that some of the names would match, but other than that, it didn't seem to have much to do with a Halloween party at all. I knew, based on my two previous outings with Sir Kenny as Hercule Poirot, that he would play Poirot as as a gun-brandishing action hero. And I was surprised. I was pleased. I was surprised. I was taken aback. Yes, portions of the film are definitely shot in the back and could have been better lit. There were times when the actors mumbled and I could not understand what they were saying. But A Haunting in Venice did not have that glossy sheen of fakeness that Death on the Nile did. These felt more like real people, like they were really trapped in a situation not of their own making. And it was Agatha Christie as a horror novel. I'm not a horror fan, so this was quite horrifying enough for me. But it was surprisingly good.
Well, this is based on Halloween Party, the 1969 novel. And it was also kind of surprising. There were a couple of motifs and elements in here.
Definitely right out of Halloween Party. Right out of Halloween.
There's a party with children. There's apple bobbing for apples.
Yep, and someone is nearly drowned in the apple bobbing.
But then again, they shuffled the deck a little bit in ways that I appreciated. And one of the things about the trailer that I really was kind of curious about was how heavy were they going to lean into the supernatural element.
And I thought they handled it pretty well. Is it a spoiler to say how they treated Poirot's religious values?
Probably not too much, because this is actually something you didn't like about it.
Yeah, one of the things I did not like about the movie, Sir Kenny really toned down his gun-brandishing action hero, Poirot. Really toned it down, really dialed it back. I don't think we saw a single handgun being waved around, and after the two previous films, that's really a pleasure. But he turned Poirot into a hardcore atheist, which, sorry, not going to happen. Not going to happen. But he did still keep Poirot's essential understanding of the supernatural. When Agatha handles the supernatural in any of the mysteries, not in her paranormal stories, which is a different ballgame, the way she treats the supernatural, she treats it with respect, but she also recognizes that it makes a great, wonderful, deceptive covering over real human machinations, whether it is dumb witness or a pale horse.
Pale horse especially.
There are some others that if you give me some time, I'll be able to think of what they are.
Well, he said something about superstition. It was in the Egyptian tomb.
Yeah, the Curse of the Egyptian Tomb, which was
A short story.
a short story. And I remember I was very disappointed in that particular Poirot episode because they could have really done better. But Poirot takes superstition seriously because people
believe in it.
People believe in it. They change their behavior based on what they're afraid of or what they're afraid they think will happen.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It should be said that he's the same here. He actually debunks some of the things, and then there were other things that were happening that is carried throughout the movie. As far as anything horror related is concerned, it's really in the more of the nature of jump scares and mysterious happenings.
Yes, mysterious.
So you get shocked at times.
It's not particularly bloody, despite the fact that several people die. I mean, it is not like, I guess, the Saw movies, which I have heard of and which I will never see under any circumstances.
It's very far from the Saw movies.
Huge piles of money at me.
I mean, but when there's a character who gets impaled on a statue and it happens very quick, it's almost impressionistic. You just get a moment of seeing something and then it goes away.
Yeah, and
so you're left with imagination.
Probably rather cleaner than it would have been.
Probably, but we didn't get enough chance to actually look into that. But I agree with you. It's definitely better than Death on the Nile.
Oh my gosh!
Oh
my gosh!
And
I was really wondering what I was going to have to sit through.
And because one of the reasons we call him Sir Kenny is because he's like a child with a toy. And that was in a reference to Orson Welles talking about Citizen Kane being handed the world's biggest toy shop. It was just a toy that he could play with, is to run your own movie studio.
Yes, making movies, you can do whatever you want, film whatever you can dream of. You can put your dreams on film. If you want to walk through the air, you can in a movie.
And this resulted in Orient Express, in which you see Poirot walking across the top of the train after it's already stopped in the snowstorm.
On the trestle bridge.
Yes.
On the trestle bridge.
Where he could be
hundreds of feet above the chasm to which anyone could slip and fall and plummet to their death. I'm sure any railroad men in the audience must have really yucked it up at that one.
Yeah, and it was for no particular purpose except he wanted to be seen against the mountains and the light and the snow, and he's yelling
and waving handguns around. Let us not forget that.
Well, those were separate issues as well, but he would send the camera flying, and in Venice, inside this Palazzo. We're trying to get our vocabulary. Yeah, it was a mansion. Normal people would call this an apartment block or a mansion if it's been only one person lives in it. It was a huge house, several thousand square feet for one person, her live-in doctor and her housekeeper and the doctor's son. Yeah, but in all, this was far better than Death on the Nile. I think it's better than Orient Express.
I thought it was too, because Orient Express was just too irritating. I've now seen 5 versions of Orient Express. Sir Kenny's looks really good, but there was just things in there that just really bothered me.
And I think this one was actually closer to the spirit of Agatha Christie. It repeated motifs that you've seen in her works before. There's one big borrowing that you found from Nemesis that we'll get into.
Yeah, when we get to the spoiler part. When we get to the spoiler side. But yeah, you will recognize a core plot element from Nemesis in this film.
Mm-hmm. So that's what, is there anything else you wanted to say on the non-spoiler side?
I do. If you have been holding off to go see A Haunting in Venice because of the debacle that was Death on the Nile, go see this one. I liked it much better, and I recognize all the debacle incidents from his Death on the Nile, starting with never actually filming on real boats other than the little boats out there in that water park in the Cotswold. But they didn't film on a ship. They didn't use a ship for the SS Karnak the way they did in the other 2 films. But if your concerns about Death on the Nile are holding you back from this, those were my concerns too. I feel them deeply. I know your pain. And
yes, no humping on the dance floor.
Oh, yes,
no Poirot shaving his mustache.
Oh my God. Oh yes. No stupid backstories that were made up from whole cloth. This worked. It was surprisingly tight how everything tied together, at the end.
Yeah.
And I was much more pleased with this than Death on the Nile. I will admit there are times when I was thinking, get on with the plot, but I have that in virtually every movie, so, hey, that's just me.
Okay, so we're at the 11-minute mark, so we are going to go into spoiler territory here. If you happen to dislike what you hear afterwards because it revealed plot points that you didn't want to hear about, well, that's on you, folks.
And number 1 at the top of the list is, do you know the story of Halloween Party? Because if you know the story of Halloween Party, you know who the murderer is going in. And yet, Sir Kenny did an amazing job disguising it.
Yeah. Now, this is the screenwriter, Michael Green. This time, I don't think Kenny, if he'd had any influence in the script, it wasn't at the main stage. This is credited solely to the writer, Michael Green.
Is that what the credit, you saw the credits for sure?
Yep, positive.
Well, as long as you saw the credits for sure, because of course Sir Kenny, as the director and the star, has a lot of power to make things go the way he wants. Mm-hmm. But yes, if you know the novel, you know who did it. And yet, they did a really good job disguising it. I couldn't see how they were going to make... I'm going to say her name. I'm going to say her name, folks. I couldn't figure out how they were going to make Rowena Drake the murderers and how they were going to give a reason for it. And they did. It worked. It worked great. And lest you think that this is not an Agatha Christie reasoning for Rowena Drake to kill her own daughter, kind of by accident, but as she was controlling her daughter, it's right out of Nemesis. This is what Clotilda did to Verity Hunt. And Rowena Drake in this film was faced with the same situation. Her daughter wanted to grow up. She'd met a man. She wanted to run away and marry this man and have children with him and have life with him and not be mommy's doll anymore.
And you know what? This is also amusing in the way it kind of parallels Agatha's own relationship with her daughter and Agatha's relationship with her mother. She had a close, loving relationship with her mother and a kind of distant, contentious relationship at times with her daughter. So
but
that
she
plays out in some...
She would have never...
No, she wouldn't. And she wouldn't try to chop off an intruder's head with a snow shovel, and see how they run either. So we know
but I
that...
bet she would have whacked them across the back of the head with a snow shovel.
One would hope so, yes. Yes. The movie opens up, this is 1946, I believe. No, 1947.
1947.
1947, the war is over, and Poirot is in retirement, living in Venice, and tending to his garden, nothing about growing vegetable marrows or anything like that.
And you get some beautiful footage of Venice. They must have really CGI'd the heck out of Venice, because I can't imagine that it would look that tidy and that clean and empty of people and cars. I can't imagine that Venice would look that nice.
Especially at the end where they give you an aerial shot of Venice. You know, the camera flies up and up and up, and you're not seeing cruise ships. You're not seeing hundreds of thousands of tourists.
Oh, yes. I was fascinated to see that because, of course, I've never seen Venice.
Yeah.
I've only seen pictures. And this is one of the reasons why you go to the movies, is you've got that huge screen in front of you, and you can see a place that you will never see.
Yeah.
And I had to wonder about the climate. It is October because they do tell us it's Halloween. And so I guess that's why the canopy, he has the framework of a canopy on his rooftop terrace, but he does not have anything to shield him from the burning sun. And it must be because it is the end of October, beginning of November.
Right. And like I said, he's living in retirement. He has an Italian bodyguard. And in the opening scenes, you see him going through the streets and being bothered by people, asking him to investigate. And the guard does kind of brutal things at times. I mean, he literally dumps a man in the river.
Yep, exactly.
And threatens them to keep him away. Later on, he gets a visitor. The guard says, there's this woman here to see you. And he says she's a friend. And Poirot says, I have no friends. And the guard shows him an apple.
Which is, of course, as we all know, Ariadne Oliver's most favoritist thing to eat in the entire world. She is never without an apple, and bags of apples spill out and apples roll around. And there's a memorable scene in the David Suchet Poirot where Ariadne Oliver pitches an apple core out of the car as she is zooming through the village and hits Poirot right in the forehead with the apple core.
So they're talking, and she's trying to get Poirot out of retirement. to do something. And all this, what is especially nice is that this actually sets up something that pays off later in the movie. And there's a couple of incidents as well along the way. For example, you learn that Ariadne Oliver, of course, we know she writes about a vegetarian Finn. And Poirot gets blamed. It's assuming that Poirot is stealing Ariadne's detective's ticks for his own.
Even though it's the other way around. And of course, Ariadne admits that her last 3 books have not done as well. Small beer, as the critics would put it. And she needs that new bestseller to pump up her sales and to be back on top of the world again.
Right. So she intends to take Poirot to this villa, to this
seance, because
but there's going to be a party there first.
Yes, there's going to be a children's Halloween party. And
for the orphans.
For the orphans in this incredibly, really unpleasant looking building. And I guess because the kids are orphans and the nuns don't have any money, well, if Rowena Drake is willing to pay for it, well, they're going to go.
Yeah.
And they have this remarkably creepy shadow puppet show about how this very building had a lot of plague-stricken children who were shut up to die by their doctors and nurses. And apparently that turns out to be true.
And it plays out in the rest of the story as well. Again, they set up something and it pays off. But this time, even though there's bobbing for apples and all that, the children are sent home when the party is over because there's going to be a seance with
Joyce Reynolds. So
yes.
One of the characters whose name matches. So this Joyce Reynolds is played by Michelle Yeoh, and she is a famous medium. She prefers the name medium instead of a psychic or a spiritualist because she's not too tall and not too short and not too this and not too that. But what's unusual about her is that she can contact the dead. And I thought they handled her really well. Eventually it's revealed that she is a fraud in some ways. There are other ways. When you were watching her spinning around and speaking in another person's voice, that's not fraud.
That's right, because there's the young boy, the doctor's son, Leopold, recognizes the voice of Alicia Drake, Rowena's daughter, who died a year ago. She had apparently jumped out the window into the canal and drowned
herself, yes. Some of what Poirot sees is hallucinations, and there's a reason for it, too. But not all, and it's almost as though they're directed hallucinations. He does spend time arguing with various people about the existence of God, which Poirot would never do.
Well, we can also mention Mrs. Reynolds. She communicates with a typewriter. She is very up-to-date in communicating with the spirits.
Yeah, no planchettes or tiles here.
That's right. She has a typewriter, and it sits there by itself on pieces of paper. Someone should really restrain Sir Kenny, because during the seance, she's calling out to the spirits, and the typewriter hits a key, and you see this letter flash up, and somebody grabs the paper out and shoves it in the camera's face.
And somebody else has to be putting more paper into that typewriter.
We're not seeing that part. He's just doing it for effect. Like, oh, it's a letter M. It's a letter X. Oh, this must mean this. This must mean that. And then Poirot eventually figures out how they're doing it. But later on, the typewriter still works, even though he's holding the controller in his hand.
Yeah, and the typewriter still works. Mrs. Reynolds' second accomplice is revealed. The spirits speak through her. She's spinning around. Nobody is spinning that chair. There are no accomplices who can spin that chair around like that.
Yeah.
And you have to wonder what actually happened. That's how Agatha liked handling it, which is there is more to this world than we know or we would like to think we know. I thought it was really well handled. I thought it really was.
Yeah. And things happen, of course. They break up after the seance and go various places. And Poirot is the one. And again, this is another motif they've used, because Poirot talks to Mrs. Reynolds, and of course Mrs. Reynolds says, you're here to try to show me I'm a fraud and all that you don't believe. And they spar back and forth, and she ends up putting on him the cape and mask that she wore. And it's a motif you see in Venice during Carnival, the black cape, and there's this white mask with
various very unusual masks.
They're very unusual masks, full face, and she arrived in this, and she puts it on Poirot. And he's wandering around thinking, and he comes upon the room. I think he's asked you should learn to have fun again. You should learn to loosen up.
And he looks at the apples, a classic symbol of temptation, folks.
That's right, because it shows up in the clock. They have the mechanical clock with Adam and Eve on it that, go back and forth with the snake. Durr.
That's why we work better as a team, because I see things that you don't and you see things that I don't.
Mm-hmm. And Poirot decides to bob for apples, and he takes the mask off and he's bobbing over, and somebody tries to drown him.
Because they see that he's dressed like Mrs. Reynolds.
Right. And, of course, he's fighting it off, and he collapses as well. And there's something else that I wanted to say that happened as well. Now I can't think of it. But anyway, the reason why I say it now, again, we're doing spoilers, is because there's a scream, and Michelle Yeoh leaves the movie going over the balcony and impaled on a statue.
Which we have seen before, because remember, this was in Nemesis. It was in the Miss Marple version. It was in the Marple version of Nemesis with, I want to say Julia, I can't remember now.
Julia McKenzie?
Yeah, it was Julia McKenzie, or if it was Geraldine McEwen. I cannot remember which one it was, but one of the characters ends up impaled on a statue in an abandoned nunnery. And
yeah, that's right.
And maybe that's a little shout out.
Again, you see the same motifs starting to play over and over again, which is very nice.
But Nemesis is important because that's almost a way. I'm probably reading more into this than I should be, but Nemesis plays a part in the climax.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're trapped in this grand mansion, this decaying grand mansion, and my God, does that place need maintenance? And there's water in the basement because, hey, it's in Venice.
This is a nightmare. This old house wouldn't touch this.
It's pouring down rain outside. They're having this torrential storm. All of the kids left early enough, for which they should be deeply grateful. And so everyone here is trapped in the house. And the events move very quickly. The film basically takes place in about 24 hours.
Oh, no, it's even less than that. It's just overnight. Because remember, the murder takes place about midnight and after about dawn. So it's over 6 hours.
Well, the main part of the film, because Ariadne is there.
Oh, yeah, before and then after.
But yeah, the main events.
Most of the events take place in the villa.
At night.
Because
in one night.
In
one night. From the Halloween party until until Poirot does the Poirot and says, "You done it."
That's right. And in between, he basically orders the house shut down. He has his Italian bodyguard there, and somebody else agrees to guard the doors and make sure that nobody leaves, no matter what happens. So they're all trapped inside. And there's, of course, various jump scares and visitations, hauntings. Poirot is actually talking to a child at one point.
Yes, and this is again where, as it turns out, he has been fed honey laced with a hallucinogen. Let's see if I can say that word correctly. He's been fed hallucinogen-laced honey. So is this his subconscious speaking to him, telling him what he already has worked out? Or is something directing his subconscious to say, this is the image that needs to be brought up so that you can make the connections you need to make to solve this case. Just like he sees water flowing down walls. Water is a big motif in this film. You see water everywhere. I mean, hey, it's Venice and it's also pouring down rain, but it shouldn't be raining inside.
But it's a villa that hasn't been repaired in a long time, so I would expect to see...
I know, but not that much.
Not that much. And of course,
and not like the bathroom sink where, the water comes out so hot it is steaming.
Yeah.
And he thinks he's turned off the taps, and he has, and then they turn themselves back on again.
That's right. There's another great bit of byplay concerning Dr. Ferrer's son, Leopold, who's this boy who is, 9, 10 years old, maybe?
Yeah, probably 9 or 10, and he is one of those kids who was forced to grow up really, really fast because Dad is severely incapacitated as a result of his wartime experiences.
Yes, he liberated
concentration camp.
And that is horrific enough in addition to war. So his son acts as his caretaker. He's trying to calm him down when he gets enraged, and he is very smart as well. And he's all wearing this suit and tie throughout the night, which takes a lot of self-discipline to do, but apparently he has it in spades. Maybe I shouldn't exactly say what his role in this, but if you think of Agatha Christie, who always has anybody capable of murder and anybody capable of being murdered, there's going to be some major surprises at the end.
But again, if you know the novel, You shouldn't be surprised.
Mm-hmm.
You should not be surprised. Do you remember?
No. Not at all.
Well,
I mean, except for watching the episodes. I mean, we saw the Poirot Halloween party.
Okay, well, I will just go ahead and say it then. You don't want me to?
No, I don't think so. I think this is one of those major ones at the very end that is really, Agatha likes pulling tricks out of her bag.
So we'll let this trick go. We'll let you be surprised by this trick.
But let's go. We can talk about Ariadne Oliver because Tina Fey plays her. And what did you think of her?
Not my favorite Ariadne Oliver.
There's only been two others.
Well, yeah, Lally Bowers and Zoe Wong. No, three, because Jean Stapleton was Ariadne Oliver, too.
That's right, yes.
And I liked all three of those Ariadne Olivers better than I liked Tina Fey as Ariadne Oliver. I really didn't care for her.
Okay.
I did think that reasoning behind her working with the bodyguard and inviting, and it was her who invited Maxim, the ex-fiancé, to the seance. That felt kind of a stretch, but I could go with it. You're already in this haunted house in Venice, so really, what's one more?
Well, it sounds like a very Hollywood thing for her to do. That she would be actually incapable of simply writing a good mystery novel, that she has to set this up so that she presents Poirot with an almost impossible task so that she could crib off of it for her latest book.
And,
which is
if she has enough imagination to do that, she could write her own books.
Yeah, it's not that much.
That I couldn't quite go for.
It was a bit of a deconstruction, a little bit of turning her into something that was too grasping, too American.
Yeah. And it was not Ariadne Oliver. I would not accept that. I couldn't buy that as Ariadne Oliver. I've seen 3 different films. Now I've seen 4. This is my 4th Ariadne Oliver on film. Just seemed a little too American.
Yeah.
But not the way Jean Stapleton was.
Yeah.
I would not argue against anyone else in the film, except I really didn't like Tina Fey in this part. I kept thinking, you just don't quite seem right. Maybe it was bad script writing. I don't know.
Or maybe it's too familiar a face as well. It's kind of, but then you haven't seen her. You haven't seen her on Saturday Night Live or in any of her.
It's a TV program?
Well, not now, I think, because of the strike. But it was some little late night variety show thingy.
Oh, it's one of the vast number of TV shows I have never seen.
That's true. That is also true. But overall, I thought this was good. I enjoyed myself.
Oh, yes.
I enjoyed myself far more than I expected. And let's face it, if you go into a movie and the previous 2 outings have been
disappointing or bad,
it has a very high hurdle to go over.
And they did.
Yeah, because as it got started, as it got into the Halloween party, I'm thinking, okay, this is good. This is good. And then once he finds the trick to the medium and you actually start realizing, okay, this is a murder mystery, because in a way they emphasize the hauntings and the supernatural, and you think, oh God, they're going to put Poirot into a horror movie in which there are going to be demons and devils running around. And instead, no, it's actually a much more conventional but deeply felt mystery, and deeply felt in that these are going to be people who are hurting.
Yes, and all of these people are damaged as a result of this. They were damaged going in, and for some of them, it is going to be worse. They're going to have to live with what they did for the rest of their lives. I'm thinking of Leopold in particular.
Oh, God, yes.
He's going to have to live with this forever. But again, the supernatural shows up occasionally. Is it time to talk about Rowena Drake?
Sure. Let's do it.
So, Rowena, if you know the novel, you know that Rowena Drake did it in conjunction with her lover, Michael Garfield, so that she could have the beautiful garden. Now here, Rowena Drake is a very different character, and there is no lover on the scene.
She's an opera singer.
She's an opera singer. She's living in seclusion since her daughter died. She was able to sing because she had a daughter.
Waiting for her in the dressing room.
Waiting for her in the dressing room. And she was this world-famous soprano, and she sang all around the world. And when they would come back to Venice, and that was their home away from home and their hidey hole, and they had this beautiful rooftop garden. And what happens, of course, is that girls grow up. They stop being their mother's little doll, their little toy, their second self, their mini me. Girls grow up, and then they meet boys.
In this case, it was Maxim Gerard, who was a chef.
Who was a chef, and she wanted to run off with Maxim and get married, and she was engaged, and Rowena couldn't tolerate it. She could not lose her daughter. But
at the same time, there's that little byplay because Maxim was apparently realizing they didn't have any money, and he broke off the engagement.
Well, right? Rowena is not a reliable source of information. So when you see this the second time, you have to realize that virtually everything that she says is a lie. So she says Maxim broke off the engagement because they didn't have enough money. That's not what Maxim says. What he says is he came to the conclusion that Alicia was starting to descend into mental illness. Now, some of that might have been that her mother was already poisoning her with hallucinogens. We don't know. And that he also realized that Rowena Drake was going to be the kind of person that they could never escape her and have a life of their own. And he didn't think he could deal with that. So he broke off the engagement, and then soon thereafter, or so he tells Poirot, he came back begging to marry her, begging to be forgiven by Alicia because he loved her that much. And he loved Alicia enough that even, a year after her death, when he gets that mysterious invitation to a seance about her death, he shows up. And if he didn't care, he wouldn't have bothered.
Yeah.
He cared enough to get on a plane and show up for this.
Yeah, and there's also a nice little bit with the photo of the two of them that was torn in half, and she had her half, and he had his picture of her and her picture of him.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
And they both kept it. Yeah.
So Rowena could not bear to let her daughter go. And so could she keep her daughter? And if you were thinking that this isn't somewhere Agatha would go, well, this is what Clotilda did to Verity Hunt in Nemesis. Mm-hmm. Verity Hunt was Clotilda's ward. She was the child Clotilda raised. She adored Verity Hunt. And when Verity Hunt met a nice boy and wanted to run away to get married and to have a family and a husband and children of her own, Clotilda could not bear to be separated from her, and she killed the person she loved the most. And here, Rowena could not bear to let Alicia go, and so she poisoned her, and she kept her poison, a little low dose every day in the honey, and then events overtook her, and Alicia died, and Rowena had to decide what to do because her daughter was dead, and she needed the sympathy, and she certainly didn't need a police autopsy finding out that her daughter had been poisoned, and so she faked the suicide. She took a gardening trowel and drew the marks on Alicia's back and threw her over the balcony into the canal.
Marks on the back was a part of the curse that the house was under, that people who died in the house would have these marks on the back. So you have a lot of deeply weird legends going on here.
Well, this is Venice. What I was really impressed by was going in, I know who the murderer was in Halloween Party. And I really couldn't see how they were going to make Rowena Drake the murderer.
Yeah.
And they did. They did. I was really impressed by how well it was handled, how logical it was when you saw the explanation.
Yeah.
When you saw the explanation, when you saw the setup, when you saw how what you thought you saw versus what you should have seen if you had been paying more careful attention, it really worked. It is hard to take, and this is one of the things Agatha does so well, it is really hard to take the most likely suspect, the person who was there all the time, and make it not look like they did it. Mm-hmm. And this film succeeded.
Yeah. All we suggest is that you do not wear your sunglasses in the theater.
Yes, a lot of it is shot in the dark.
A lot of it's shot in the dark. Sit up close so you can hear if you have any problems with dialogue. But we recommend going in and seeing it. And
yes, a vast improvement over Death on the Nile and Murder on the Orient Express.
And since movies like this depend on their box office, this is why, in our own little way, we choose to vote with our money by actually going out to the theater to see this.
We bought our tickets at the flagship cinema in Palmyra.
Mm-hmm. A very nice theater.
It was, and the Blizzards at the Dairy Queen afterwards were very nice too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is what date night is like for us, folks. 30 years of marriage and we're still going to Dairy Queen.
I like it.
I do too. I'm joking. I'm trying to make a joke. It didn't. That didn't work. I'm going to cut that out.
But it was no. You should leave it in. You should leave it in. That's why people listen to us. I was expecting to be disappointed.
Yeah.
And I wasn't.
Yeah.
I was surprised. I was pleased.
And this will conclude. This is our 60th episode, by the way, which is also another reason why I thought it'd be kind of nice. I like ending on a round number.
Well, we do still have some more coming up. But
we do. We're going to
that will be a while from now.
That'll be a while. We're not. This is the last of the movies that we've seen so far. We're going to go back to some of the movies that we have put out annotated versions of, like Murder on the Links and Murder of Roger Ackroyd, and some of the other early books as well. So this is going to conclude this episode of Agatha Christie She Watched, and we'll see you at the movies. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Agatha Christie She Watched is Teresa Peschel and Bill Peschel, produced by Bill Peschel. New episodes come out every week wherever you stream your content. If you enjoyed this podcast, you can help support us by going to anchor.fm/mystery and leaving a 5-star rating and review, and by helping to spread the word. To advertise on Mystery She Watched, email Peschel at peschelpress.com. All questions and comments can be emailed to Peschel at peschelpress.com. And thank you for listening.